Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I really want to try and understand your $1.85 trillion in deficit reduction against some baseline. So I believe we're talking about the CBO baseline. I mean, that's what everybody can compare to because it's been published. So if you'd write a few numbers down here, I'd appreciate it because I got a couple questions. So in terms of outlays, let's start there. The Chairman's mark is $46.4 trillion in outlays, correct? Yes.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
CBO baseline is $47.2 trillion in outlays, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now let's figure out what the difference is between those. War spending. In the Chairman's mark, how much of the $46.4 trillion is war spending? We have $75 billion. I thought I heard you say $200 billion. How much war spending is in the Chairman's mark?
There's $100 billion in 2013. There's $50 billion in 2014.
let's
and $25 billion in 2015.
Yeah, so I'll round that.
2013.
Okay,
Right,
let's just for this purposes, I'll take your answer and we'll round it to $200 billion to keep this simple. In the CBO baseline, I believe it's $1 trillion, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so the difference there, so we're going to have to adjust the CBO baseline by about $800 billion, okay, for apples to apples. So we start then. Is there any Sandy?
Only in 2013 we don't extrapolate it out.
Okay, and I believe in the CBO that's about $300 billion, correct?
That's correct.
So we'd have to lower it by another $300 billion, the CBO baseline, correct, for comparison? Okay. Then in terms of interest, CBO baseline has about $200 billion more in interest expense than the Chairman's mark, correct? That is correct. Okay, so so we're looking at apples to apples, okay? Chairman's mark is $46.4 trillion, but we've just totaled about $1.3 trillion that we have to reduce the CBO baseline to compare apples to apples. Is that correct?
Right, but again, this gets to the same issue that I was talking about.
No, but again, this is very simple. So, apples to apples, if we take $47.2 trillion, reduce it by $1.3 trillion, now the comparable baseline in terms of outlays for the CBO is $45.9 trillion, correct? 47.2 minus 1.3 is 45.9, okay? Versus the Chairman's mark of 46.4, correct? That's just really simple, right?
I mean, that's your current policy baseline, yes.
Okay, so again, we're comparing CBO. So,
but no, it's not just CBO, it's CBO as you've just adjusted.
Pardon?
CBO as you've just adjusted for your current policy.
But again, we're comparing apples to apples. The CBO has $800 billion more in war spending.
Right, but we started.
So we pull that out. The CBO has $300 billion more in Sandy spending, so we pull that out. And then interest it has $200 billion more, we pull that out. So we adjust the CBO down.
Right, and all I'm saying is we've gone a step further and done it with the sequester and SGR.
No, that is complicating the situation. So we're now to $45.9 trillion.
Well, he has
so that's now the Chairman's mark spends $500 billion more than CBO baseline, correct?
Actually, no. You gave me the first number. CBO baseline was $47.2 trillion.
No, but we adjust it down to be comparable to the Chairman's mark.
To get to your current policy. The first number you gave me, the CBO baseline.
To the Chairman's mark. Again, I'm trying to compare apples to apples. That's very difficult in government accounting, but I'll
agree with you.
Okay, so again, you take CBO baseline, you pull out the spending that is not included in the Chairman's mark out of the CBO baseline, so it's comparable. So the comparable number.
Right, but I would go a step further, sir, and do the sequester. I mean, that's been part of.
Forget. That's
fine, but that's your
you don't
policy
have to do that.
decision,
You don't
sir.
have to do that. It's simpler than that. So anyway, the comparable figure for CBO baseline is $45.9 trillion versus $46.4. The Chairman's mark spends $500 billion more, and it taxes $1 trillion more.
I don't agree with that,
so,
sir.
So the difference there really is not $1.85 trillion in deficit reduction. It's about $0.5 trillion.
Under your current policy baseline, that is a true statement, sir. That's not the current policy baseline that the Chairman's using.
Thank you. Again, the problem was we're not even dealing with the same numbers then. You're not comparing apples to apples with the CBO baseline.
Again, sir, the first number you gave me was the CBO baseline. It was
But don't we have to adjust that?
But we have all sorts of policy decisions we're making here, sir.
The CBO baseline includes $800 billion more in war spending. $300 billion more in Sandy spending and $200 billion more. Don't
All
we have
true.
to pull that out so it's comparable?
And I think we would say we would pull out the sequester, and that's the difference here. And I'm sorry, I know it's confusing, and I'm really sorry. There's budget years, we have a
You'd
lot-
have to pull out the sequester CBO as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I've
So
done
you'd have
that.
to pull them out of both.
Right, and that's the point, and we compare to that, and we put in a different mix of savings. Again, what's really relevant here is to get to the 4.3 trillion, whether you want to count the sequester in your baseline, and we're already at 3.6 trillion, because then we'll count it all. We're at 3.6, we still get the 4.3 trillion by adding $700 billion. Or if you want to, as a chairman, start at 2.4 trillion, and then you do it as part of this package, then you get the 190, you get to the 4.3 trillion.
You are just
Senator
totally
Johnson, if-
confusing the situation. It's far easier than that. The $1.85 trillion is totally false.
I don't agree. I think we're very clear with how we've laid it out. I agree.
Senator Johnson, if I can just interrupt.
Well, that's very technical. I'm trying to get to the numbers.
I understand that, and I want everybody to be able to answer their questions, and I don't want this to be erupt into a political debate. We're going to have a lot of time to do that on the floor and throughout the next week.
Madam Chairman.
But, Senator Sessions,
Could I respond?
I would just ask one thing. I'd like to limit 5 minutes to each person so that we can get through all of this, because I do want to make sure we have the ability to offer.
I object to that. The reason we're having difficulty is because this staff is failing to be responsive to Senator's questions. Senator Johnson is exactly correct. He's talking about $4.6 trillion. He's counting stuff that's not even in the budget, that occurred years ago, is not relevant to anything other than policy. We're asking this staff specific financial questions. We expect specific financial answers. And we're looking at a situation where you're double counting and not counting $1 trillion in extra spending. You're not counting $1 trillion in extra spending by saying we're going to just turn off the sequester, which allows $1 trillion more in spending to occur, and not count it. That's what we want to know, and we intend to find out before this day is over. And my colleagues, if I'm wrong about this, I'll accept being in error. But our staff has looked at this. I can't possibly see how it's any other way than I have explained it. Now, we've got other members that want to ask questions.
Yes, we do as
if
well.
we can't
We'll work
agree
with
on
you.
$1 trillion, we are really showing how it is that our country is in such financial state.
Well, Senator